Welcome back to part 3 of my cam install on my 2007 GT500. So we finally got everything timed. I went ahead and ran a quick little compression test by hand, pretty much involving putting the compression tester in each bank. One bank, do a certain number of turns, you should get compression on a certain stroke. Do the other bank, same deal. So I'm pretty sure we did everything right, looking at the manual and everything like that. Sorry if last video was kind of confusing. Again, watch the modular head shop video I'd linked below in that other one, and you'll see everything you need to do. I didn't watch the full video on that until the very end, which is why I was all over the place trying to figure it out. So that's that. Now it's time to get into reassembly of everything. So the first thing we gotta do is we're gonna go ahead and put our front timing cover back on. Now it is time to get back into the reassembly of everything. So first thing we gotta do obviously is put our front timing cover back on. That was the last thing we took off. It's the first thing that is going back on. Before we do that, we have some prep to do. So I went ahead and picked up a new gasket for it. I've been going with Molly, I don't know what you wanna call it. This brand gasket has never had any issues with me, pretty much decent OEM brand. So we're gonna go ahead and do this install. I went ahead and cleaned up the front cover. There's a lot of like, just stuff on here as best I can get it for now. And yeah, so we got to clean up all these sealing surfaces here. They've got kind of, just a little bit of debris on them. Got to clean up the engine side sealing surfaces. They're doing pretty good shape, but we'll go ahead and clean those as best we can as well. Got all our bolts out here. We're looking up torque specs. These are going to be 18 foot-pounds, the thin ones, and the fat ones are going to be 37 foot-pounds. Loctite everything, obviously. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip you on time lapse. I'm gonna go clean up all these sealing surfaces. We're also replacing our, front main seal. Well, this one's actually in pretty good shape, plenty of pliability to it. So, I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, well, now we're gonna replace them all over here. It's got 50,000 miles on it, and it's from 2007. Might as well better safe than sorry. So yeah, new thing right here. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as you saw, I was prepping all the surfaces. I missed this bottom one right here. I need to go ahead and get that real quick. This is just a minor abrasive wheel, and then I'm using a parts cleaner and paper towel just to go over everything, make sure we're clean. So far, so good. I used a razor blade to get off some of this thicker silicone. As long as you're very flat and don't gouge the metal, you're fine. So this is our new gasket. This is our old one. And looking at it, it looks like this one used to have this little flare here. So this side faces the crank, and this side, it goes in like that. Little spring in here goes towards the motor. Little spring in here goes towards the motor. So we're gonna go ahead and install this next. It's gonna pop it right here. I'm gonna see if I can find a socket or something big enough to go around this whole thing. And basically we're gonna seat it basically flush with the bottom, flush in here. So let's go and put that in next. And then I'm gonna finish prepping this, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the block side. All right, she's in. Want to make sure it's nice and even. Then we're going to put fresh oil on this before the balancer goes back on, and it should be good to go. That is all per the Ford manual. So, clean up the bottom surface, and then, like I said, engine. All right, got all the surfaces cleaned to my satisfaction. Pretty much want to make sure all this old silicone was off on these corners here. So where the heads meet the block, silicone goes there. It's going to go here when we put the valve covers on the top, and then it's gonna go in the bottom corners of the oil pan. I'm probably gonna run a very thin bead around the entire base of the oil pan, just to make sure that we're good there, because once you break a seal like this, sometimes it's a bit finicky going back together. So what I'm gonna do now, got my 5W50 full synthetic Motorcraft, and I'm going to pop the cap on it, and I'm just gonna basically pour a little bit of oil into the cap of this and make sure our timing chains aren't totally dry. So I'm gonna drape a little bit here. And you don't need much. It's gonna get oil pressure pretty quick. And then the way it oils the chains is there's oil passage on all of the, what's the word I'm thinking of, on all of the tensioners. And they get tension, they also let a little bit bleed through so that oil can get all the timing chains. But again, we don't wanna start this thing up dry and like absolutely destroy everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some oil on this and silicone down. I guess we're ready to go ahead and put on our front timing cover. So here it goes. This is the silicone that I'm using, just your regular Permatex Ultra Gray. So the way they have black, gray, and red. Red is for high temperatures, like real high temperatures. I've actually never really had a problem with the black stuff, but I figured we'd go for gray. Gray is meant for more vibration resistance, so make sure we don't have any dust on here. So the way I'm gonna go ahead and, it's pretty straightforward. And the instructions for this stuff, so you go ahead and put it on, hand tighten everything once it's on, let it sit for about, I believe it's an hour, and then you go ahead and torque everything down to its final bolt spec. So that's the directions we're gonna follow. They have other gasket makers that are pretty good too, obviously. I mean, they're all kind of the same thing. But yeah, so that's the one I like using, and then it's ready for use in about 24 hours if you follow the instructions directly. Sometimes you can be a little bit loose with those directions. However, we have more than enough time to spare, so I'm not gonna really stress it. Just so we're gonna read this together real quick. For best results, surface should be clean and dry, check. Cut nozzle and apply continuous 1/16 inch to 1/4 inch, 2 to 6 millimeter bead of silicone to one surface, surrounding all the bolt holes, assembly parts, and surrounding all the bolt holes. Assemble parts immediately while silicone is still wet. Finger tighten until material begins to squeeze out around the flange. Let dry for 1 hour and then tighten to torque specifications. Allow 24 hours to fully cure before filling with fluids or returning to service. Replace cap after use. So easy day, like I was just saying. Literally exactly what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and run a bead of silicone around the base here where the oil filter meets. Specifically, it needs to go along here on the engine side. So specifically, it needs to go here along here on the engine side. We're just gonna run a very thin bead around the base just to make sure we're good to go. There's gonna be a spot here, 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 and here. Here, 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 and here. So the two top ones we're not gonna do till the valve cover goes back on. Everything else is gonna get silicone now. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so got everything pretty much buttoned up. It's been about an hour. I went ahead and tossed in the bottom oil pan bolts just because whenever there's silicone, it can sometimes cover the bolt holes. If it dries like that, it's kind of a pain in the butt. I also wanted to make sure the gasket got a nice squish in there. So we'll be taking them back out when I have to lift the motor back up again. But it's not really gonna hurt anything. I just wanna make sure we're good there. So next up, I'm gonna go ahead and torque this stuff down. So what I was saying earlier, the small ones are gonna be 18 foot-pounds, the big one is 37. And the actual manual does not show the torque spec for these exact bolts. However, it does show the torque spec for the oil cooler bolts. And I've been noticing over the past couple of years of doing motor work, anytime that like generally the bolt size is what dictates the torque. So looking at the oil pan bolts, or looking at the oil cooler bolts, you can tell the big ones are the same size as the big ones on here, and the small ones are the same size as the small ones on here, bolting into their respective spots. So that's kind of where I'm getting the torque specs from for that. Unfortunately, they just, like I said, they didn't have it, so we're making a little bit of a logical leap there, and that's what I'm torquing them down to. So I went ahead and picked up a new oil cooler gasket, and this is where this one goes. Both holes line up all except for that one. Looking on the side of the block, there is a hole here, but it's not used as it seems. So not sure what the deal is, but what was in here factory are these two little guys right here. So this is still pretty rubbery, and looking at how everything lines up, I took it out, cleaned up the inside of these seals, and we're just gonna put this guy back in here. After looking at it, I just don't see, like, I mean, that's all it is right there. And if we try to put this one over it, there's gonna be these two giant gaps right in here. These gaskets do not line up with these actual holes. They would line up if these were solid. So I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but we're not gonna use this. We're gonna reuse the old gaskets here. Probably gonna add just a little bit of RTV around these two edges just to make sure everything is happy, and I'll put that back on. The other side of our cooler, dripping oil everywhere. We have this side right here. This is the oil cooler gasket side, or oil cooler rather, the actual box. And that goes up in here. Same deal, a couple of O-rings, two here, and the other two are still on the actual oil box itself. And we'll go ahead and set those there. So same deal on this other side here. These two came out attached to the oil thing, but we got our two O-ring looking things right here, 1 and 2, and really no other gaskets. So I don't really know what the deal is with that, to be honest, but it is what it is, and that's how it is. So we're just gonna bolt it back down same way it came off. All right, now for torque specs. All of these little guys are all the same bolt. We got, let's see now, I'm trying to think. We got one here, here, two here, and then the two big ones are all the way off in this corner over here. The two big ones go right here. Those are 37 foot-pounds. These are all 18 foot-pounds. So this is gonna be kind of interesting to put back on. It's kind of turd coming off, but I'm gonna clean up a couple of these little connectors a little bit, see if I can get some of that crap off, and then go ahead and put it on. Got a little ahead of myself. I totally forgot the motor mount has to come off to get this thing back on, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. All right, oil cooler assembly's back on. You can kind of see this whole thing right here is it. Torque down, 18 foot-pounds for the small ones, 37 for the big ones. So now next up, got to go ahead and get the driver's side header back on. All right, so looking at the manual for the exhaust header install, exhaust manifold, left-hand side, that's what we're doing. We're gonna tighten the bolts to 15 foot-pounds. If I can get a torque wrench in there, 15 foot-pounds is not too much, so I can probably just gauge that by hand. Something interesting I did not know, for the steering intermediate shaft, they have this super helpful picture, which I didn't catch the first time I did this. they want you to take off the 2 bolts that go into the firewall, and it looks like remove that cover, and then you can actually slide your steering shaft up all the way. I obviously did not do that. I was getting stuck, it wasn't sliding up. I thought this little area right in here was supposed to, well, I thought that little area right here, this guy was supposed to be able to move. Obviously that's not the case, so the bolts that are supposed to come out look to be, they gotta be on the inside of the firewall because I can see the 2 studs sticking out. So I guess that's how we're supposed to take this off and remove the ones on the inside, and you can move that, but whatever. Anyway, header's gonna go on. I'm gonna skip the time lapse on this one just because it kind of sucks getting this thing on. Just know we're using our gaskets. They are multi-layer steel gaskets, not whatever comes normal, or basically OEM gaskets right here. And bolts go down to 15 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and install next. All right, header's back on. Actually went on way easier than it came off. Now I know how to put my hand in there and everything, get all the bolts in. So that's good. Next thing I'm gonna go ahead and do, I went ahead and stuck our oil dipstick tube in. That has to go in while the motor is up. It will not go in or come out without it being up. So I just slid it back into place. So it's still loose. I'm waiting until I can get this valve cover back on before I tighten it down. I want to make sure I have some wheel room there. Next I'm gonna go ahead and do, there's 2 8mm bolts on this thing that hold whatever this pipe is. Honestly, I still don't know what this thing goes to, but we're gonna go ahead and put those guys in next. And then I'm gonna put my steering shaft back in and kind of keep going from there. So making progress for sure. All right, so I went ahead and got this tube rear bolt bolted in. I bent the bracket just a little bit, so it's a little off. I was gonna push it back and it's fine. Do yourself a favor though, and freaking bolt the rear one of these in the back before you put the header back on, because that took a while to get it there. One of the headers blocks this bolt like perfectly, so it took a while to get it in, but I got it. I'm gonna go and pop this guy in now, and then I don't know the torque spec for that. Probably like something real light. It's just 8mm, so nothing crazy. Probably 89 inch-pounds is my guess, based on the way these were. So we're just gonna do that real quick, and then continue on. So if you saw my previous video where I have chapters in here on installing in the engine bay part 1, one of the reasons the video is so I can figure out how everything goes back together. So I'm basically working back up my chapters list backwards. Timing cover, instead of removing, installing the oil cooler, installing the driver's side cook's header, finding out why the oil cooler needs to come off, blah, blah, blah. Water pump, so that's the next thing that's gonna go on after, well, we continue onwards. Looks like I missed a few things in here, no biggie, but we're gonna go get that guy on, and then that should be everything that is in the way. So I'm gonna go and put our oil cooler on after that. So let's go ahead and get the oil cooler on and this bolt, and I'll give you torque specs when we're ready. All right, so next thing we're gonna go and get on is our engine mount. Total, I was about to put on the oil cooler, not right. Engine mount needs to go on next because oil cooler blocks easy access to the bolt, so it's already off. Might as well get that on. Engine mount's back on, and it was kind of a pain in the butt to get everything lined up. I had to loosen them up and retighten them because I tightened 2 without getting the other bolts started first. I don't want to cross thread anything, that'd be very bad. So next up, we're gonna go get the oil cooler on. I went ahead and flipped it over to let it drain because I realized I had not actually drained it before, and the only reason I needed to do that is when I flipped it over, it started making a mess, as you can see. So wipe this up a little bit later. Anyway, all the bolts are right here. They are an 8mm. Surfaces, I'm gonna wipe down real quick, nothing crazy. And they get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. So let's go ahead and do that next. All right, oil cooler's back in and torqued down. Next thing I'm gonna go ahead and do, we're gonna lower the engine down, engine mounts on and all that. And we're gonna get our steering shaft back in. Seems to make the most sense of the next logical step. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Steering shaft's back in. I had to reach inside the car a couple of times. The inside the car, they want us telescoping, so that's why they want you to unbolt it and all that fun stuff. So I had to kind of like finagle back and forth. I did lock the steering wheel. If you didn't see the disassembly, you turn it to a certain direction straight. I rotated it this way until it locked, and that exposed all the bolts for me. That also prevents the steering wheel from moving and messing up your clock spring. You can strap it in place, do whatever you need to do, but that's how I did mine. I will say when we start this car up, we're going to have a decent amount of smoke from the headers. A lot of oil dripped down from the very back corner onto the headers, and I can see it. They're pretty much coated. It's not thick, but it's a film for sure, so that's that. But it's pretty much, it's really everything we got going on over here. The next thing that I think makes the most sense, I'm going to go ahead and start putting on, let's see now. Well, yeah, next thing we're going to go and do, I'm going to go ahead and put the water pump on next. I think that makes the most sense. Also, I should mention, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before, but just in case I didn't, motor mount bolts, I don't know the torque spec for those, so I went until fairly tight. They are probably around, say, 40 to 50 foot-pounds is good. And then same thing with the steering shaft. Don't know the foot-poundage for that, but it went until it's pretty tight. And those are aluminum brackets, I'm pretty sure, so don't strip them. All right, so next up we're gonna go put on our balancer. Go ahead and clean it up a little bit and looking pretty good. So all we gotta do, I'm gonna put a little silicone down the keyway to make sure that there's no issues with sealing. And then we're gonna go ahead and press it on. So to press it on, normally you want a tool like this one right here. However, GT500 crank is too deep, meaning that this whole dead section, which is all within the crank, doesn't work. This is nowhere near long enough to catch any threads. So that kind of sucks. Can't use this tool after all. So we're gonna wind up using the crank saver stud. At least this way we'll be able to thread it in, get like, you want at least 5 threads in according to Modular Head Shop. And we'll put our ARP lube around the base of the washer and the nut, and pretty much crank it on that way. So this is gonna get eventually torqued down to 130 foot-pounds. So that's basically what I'm gonna go ahead and do. Let's start the process. All right, so if you're not doing it, it's a great time to install that crank saver stud. But pretty much once you go to the bottom, that's actually the bottom of the threads on it, so that means it was all the way in, and you get plenty of threads on the nut itself. So torque down to 130 foot-pounds, it's good to go. I did forget to trim up those few burrs that I made when I was pulling this thing off. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera, and then we'll continue on. All right, so next thing I wanna go ahead and do is do the valve cover. Swipe it down, it was a little gross, and it's probably the best opportunity I'm gonna have to clean it. Yeah, I figured there's no reason to have the valve still open, so we're gonna go ahead and from start off with cleaning up everything, putting our new gaskets. Got a new gasket set, it's a Felpro gasket set, nothing crazy. And yeah, so these are our new gaskets, and then they come with new grommets for around all these bolts. So we're gonna go ahead and replace all those. So let's go ahead and get at it. Start working on that. It looks like they just come right out to the top here. Oh, easy day. That's these little rubber grommet guys right here. So let's go ahead and get working on that. All right, it's honestly pretty crazy. So, contrary to popular belief, lifting the motor up on this side by, kid you not, 1/8 of an inch, about 1/4 inch really, is all it takes, and the valve cover goes on with the brake booster being loose. So it's kind of like you want to drop it down, but lifting it up is what gets the extra clearance because it's able to clear the lip or whatever. So we have 2 stud bolts and a bunch of regular ones. I literally just put these in the wrong spots. These are both areas where the studs go. The stud goes there and the stud goes there. So the rest of them are normal bolts like this. You'll see when I'm putting it together. They get torqued down to 89 inch-pounds, and well, that's that. So let's go ahead and torque all these guys down. All right, brake booster's back on. So went ahead and got the inside pretty much buttoned up. It's 4 bolts, cinch them down pretty good, and that's about all there is to it. Nothing crazy. Just a little uncomfortable working on the driver's side, but it is what it is. So I get myself through that valve cover, but I kind of want to just finish buttoning up stuff on this side before I move over. Regardless though, the motor is still canted a little bit because of my things down below. So if I'm going down below, I'm gonna go ahead and put the exhaust back on and get all that area squared away so we don't have to go into the car for a while. Yeah, so that's the next little bit. We're gonna head under the car and reattach our exhaust. All right, oil pan bolts are buttoned up to 18 foot-pounds. Exhaust is back on, that's buttoned up. Definitely feeling more motivation than I was taking this whole thing apart, I'll say that for sure. So let's go ahead and get our valve cover on, and then we can go ahead and also bolt down our motor mounts. And well, just keep on going. So far I'm making pretty good progress. I will say it's for sure a lot easier going back together than it was coming apart. Not having a scrounge trying to figure out where everything goes and how it comes apart definitely is saving a crap ton of time. So like I was just saying, let's go ahead and knock out the valve cover next. We'll do the valve cover on this side. All right, just put in our motor mounts, and those are mount motor mounts called motor insulator bolts. But they go to the mount, from the mounts to the insulators, I guess, whatever you want to call it. 46 foot-pounds for both sides, so we did that. Got all these guys 89 inch-pounds that run around here, got little sensors on. So we're coming together, for sure. I'm gonna go ahead and toss the spark plugs in because I wanna get this wire harness to be able to come forward, and part of that is putting on all the boots. I also don't want to drop any dirt or any debris down there, so we're gonna go and put the spark plugs in real quick next. All right, plugs are in. If you're curious, we are reusing the old plugs. We're gonna be changing out new plugs during the tuning process. So for right now, tuner said don't worry about putting new plugs in yet. We're gonna change them out later. So for right now, old plugs are back in. All right, so next thing I wanted to go ahead and do, the whole reason I was getting most of this buttoned up is I wanna go ahead and bring our wiring harness back down over top of everything. I think it's gonna be easiest to run it without any of the accessories, power steering pump, or anything in the way. So we're gonna go ahead and bring that down and get all the connectors back where they're supposed to go. We do have some starters, the furthest one back on this side, and I think there might be another connector there, so we're gonna take careful note. And then this side, I know there's an oil sensor for something, temperature, who knows, that runs all the way back that way, and then we're, again, it runs up this way. So we're gonna go ahead and lay down the harness. I'm gonna hook them up. We should be good to go. All right, now that's done. Wire harness is pretty much put back where it needs to be. It's taking a minute to figure out where a couple of these plugs went. One of these goes to the power steering reservoir, and there's one down there that goes to the alternator. So, honestly, I think the alternator's the next thing I'm gonna put on. Seems to make sense. We got open access right here before the power steering reservoir goes back, so we'll go ahead and toss the alternator on next. All right, alternator's back on. Couldn't really get a torque wrench anywhere near there, so it's just pretty snug and a little bit more. It's probably around those 18 foot-pounds, same with the rest of the size bolts those are, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, I don't know. But cranked down them decently, I think it's good. I'm gonna go ahead and put the power steering pump assembly back on there. I can already guess. Well, honestly, I'm not sure exactly what these bolts are gonna come out to be torque-wise, if it says it or not. Probably the same 18 foot-pounds as everything else, but who knows. Yeah, so 3 10 mils right here. These two we put back from earlier. And this little guy right here, I don't remember if this is for the power steering. Yeah, there's a bracket right there. So that's what goes right here. So let's go ahead and let's get at it. Power steering pump's back on. Everything is bolted down to 18 foot-pounds. Trying to figure out where this plug went to. It goes to the AC thing, and then nothing goes to the actual power steering assembly itself. We got a plug right here. But yeah, it's definitely coming together. Gotta see what I want to do next, I guess. Almost forgot, not going to show this on camera, but there is a bracket underneath that goes off one of the alternator bolts. I'm going to go ahead and put that on. It's just a 10 mil, nothing crazy. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and plug some more stuff in. So I want to go ahead and get all the coil packs back on. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. All right, next up, I want to go ahead and put in all of our accessory pulleys right here. So we got, well, a decent number of them. So they're all down to 18 foot-pounds. They're all the same size bolt pretty much. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started with that. All right, got our pulleys on. I did not realize that the water pump, or this stupid idler, has to go behind the freaking water pump pulley. Like, there's no way to get it in there. So pull off the water pump real quick, put some lockdown on the bolts, put it back on. Not the pump, but the pulley itself. That's going to call it quits for tonight. Come back tomorrow. Got to get the supercharger on so we can run our belts and everything, and then our coolant. And looks like a lot of stuff as I'm looking around the garage, but I think it's less than it looks. So we'll get there. It's time consuming, but here we go. I guess see you tomorrow. Well, it's the next day. Welcome back. So I'm going to go ahead and install a new blower gasket next. I think that's the next thing that's going to go on injectors, blower, and button up all this stuff. Main reason being I want to be able to get my belt drive on because it's a pain in the butt to do with all the cooling stuff in the way even when the car is together. So if I can do it now, I'm going to do that. Yeah, so that makes most sense. We're going to go ahead and get this out of the way. And I don't know if you can tell, but in this back corner over here, it looks like there's a bit of a boost leak or something. I don't know for sure, but yeah, not super ideal. So I went ahead and decided we're going to go ahead and get a new gasket while we're there. But I've actually never taken the supercharger off before. This is my first time. I'm just gonna get a pick in here and hopefully we can just pop this guy out. Yeah. So, yeah, there we go. And we'll go pop the new one in. All right, so before the blower can go back on here, we got to go ahead and hook up the new L&M low vacuum bypass. So they sell one for Whipple, one for VMP, TVS styles chargers, and I think there's another one out there, I don't remember. All right, so now I got the blower upside down. Low vacuum bypass is located right here. It's this little guy. And you can see where it opens and closes. That's what corresponds to that little square in the back half of the charger over there. Yeah, so this, I'm not gonna even pretend to know what this does, to be honest, I really don't. Couldn't tell you. Sounds like it lets you bypass the supercharger rotors to get air in for whatever reason when there's vacuum being pulled, my guess. So this would suck it open, so I don't know, something to do with idle. I really couldn't tell you. All right, so just pulled up L&M's vacuum bypass install instructions. Looks like the URL changed since this link they gave me here. Doesn't matter. If you go to their site, you go to tech, you'll see low vacuum bypass valve install details. So I thought it was broken because I got it and I just noticed this piece was missing. Turns out that's on purpose. Bypass may appear to be damaged, but we have cut off the unused connection to avoid improper install, see below. So we don't need to use that. Looks like this vacuum line is going to become obsolete, so we'll set that off to the side, and we're gonna have to cap off the opposite side of that where that hooks into. Sick. So other than that, let's go ahead and swap these guys out. They do not give me a torque spec for these bolts. We'll go with like a little bit tight with some Loctite. Let's go and swap that out. Subscribe. Yes. All right, so this is very interesting. I'm reading up on exactly how this install goes right here. So I realize you guys can't see this. I'll link it down in the description below to go for the L&M install instructions. So basically what it's looking like is instead of, so as you saw when I was going together, the bypass is now open instead of closed. So the cams will suck significantly less vacuum than the factory ones will. And the way they want you to mitigate that is basically they want that bypass to close under boost. So we're gonna reroute that line from right here, this is the bypass line, to a line that runs basically to get boost pressure. So this guy, I don't remember where it went before. I'm gonna have to double check and see what lines I have existing, but it's gonna run around, actually probably went to the same spot. But essentially it's gonna run around and go to the manifold manifold pressure. So right here is a vacuum line that runs out to this guy. That's this one right here actually. And as you can see, there's a T in there. Yeah, so, I'm gonna put that back on there. But this guy, I believe, went right here, and then he went here. We'll figure it out in a minute. There we go. That makes sense. So this guy was here. This guy was right here. And then this line was right here. And they also want basically one of these lines. I'm gonna put a zip tie around this thing, something like that. One of these lines, I need to get another T, and it's gonna go from here into the actual supercharger. So that's where we're at right now, and I was trying to figure out exactly what I need to do. Based on how this is all routed and everything, it runs all the way around, I'm gonna probably T it so I can just reuse this line right here. This guy is now, instead of hooking up to that far side, he's gonna hook up right here. And then I'm just gonna run a T and hook it into that boost line. So that's basically where we're at. So yeah, good stuff, making progress. I need to figure out, like I was saying, where everything else runs. And we'll kind of see what we're going on here. All right, so I'm gonna go figure out vacuum lines a little bit later. Kind of see what we got once we get the blower on there and figure out how everything ran. Next thing we gotta go ahead and do though, while the blower is here, We are pulling down to a 2.8-inch pulley. That's what Tina said to run, so that's what we're gonna go ahead and do. Right now the 3-inch, so it's not too much smaller, but it should bring up a little bit of boost. I mentioned losing a little bit of boost and getting a little bit of boost earlier. Basically what I'm talking about is the cams are gonna open up a little bit more flow, not getting rid of any more power. Lower boost numbers are actually generally a good thing to make more power. Boost is resistance of how much air can't get through the motor. So that's essentially what we're doing with this. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the pulling down. We're just adding a little bit more airflow to that to kind of maximize everything. So, yep, let's go and swap out this pulley real quick. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and install the 10 supercharger bolts, 9 in my case. Basically doing a cross pattern back and forth, and they want them done to, double check. So first stage is 44 inch-pounds for all of them, and then 18 foot-pounds for all of them. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and do. All right, so after looking at this a little closer, basically what they're saying for the vacuum line, so everything's torqued down, by the way. All right, so I don't have an EGR on here, got deleted somewhere forever ago by the previous owner. So pretty much the way this thing was factorily hooked up from the factory is this line ran from that supercharger area, the missing nipple, to somewhere on this side. I actually don't know where this other side came out at. But I gotta find that. Before I find that though, so this is the factory one that hooked up to the back side. I don't know if you can see back in there. And right now it goes into the vacuum side. So we gotta cap this one off, and this now has to run over to a positive boost pressure side. And essentially whenever the blower tries to put any, or whenever there's any positive crankcase pressure, it'll shut the low or the bypass. So that's pretty much that. I gotta get a T and a cap. I'm trying to figure out if I wanna put my T, it honestly makes sense to put the T like right here. This way it's just, you know, right there. So that's probably what I'm gonna do. And then if I can, I'm gonna see if I can just find a straight through connector right here. Cause it doesn't make any sense. Also, I don't know if that needs to get capped or not. This doesn't, that's not where that went, but I don't know if that needs to get capped or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and probably put a cap on there just to make sure we're good. Other than that, it's really about all we got going on. So let me go ahead and sort out where the other end of this thing hooked up at. I honestly don't remember. I'm gonna look at the old video and see where the heck I had that running to. And then we should be getting pretty close. Oh, I remember this went. This went from up in here and it ran around over to the intake. That's what that was for. This ran over to the intake. There's a nipple on the side right here. So I guess we're capping that off too, from my understanding. A little weird, but whatever. Yep, right here. Cap the nipple on the intake tube that previously had the line running to the factory vacuum bypass. All right, cool. That's confirmed. So that's what we got to do. I'm gonna go ahead and run out and grab some stuff I need. All right, I went ahead and reconnected the fuel line as well. Belts are now routed, so next thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is go ahead and put in our cooling, I'm gonna call it the cooling octopus, that wild looking thing of all the cooling hoses everywhere. So go and put that on next. All right, so that pretty much does the radiators back in now. Everything's tightened up. I didn't bother to go on torque specs for these things, just kind of pretty snug, and then it's good to go. Next thing I'm gonna go ahead and do while I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and throw one of our Supercharger coolant pipes, the one that flows down, and we'll go ahead and tighten up our radiator drain plug and then get this guy reconnected together. So that'll be what we do next. All right, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm gonna go ahead and pre-fill and put on our oil filter. Last thing I need to do is forget about this later and freaking dump all my oil on the ground. That'd be very bad. Blow the motor, not good. So let me go do that real quick. I'm gonna do it off camera, just get it on, but putting it on here so you guys know that I remembered. All right, next up, gonna put our throttle body on. It gets torqued down to 89 inch-pounds, same as everything else pretty much, it feels like. Small bolts, 89 inch-pounds across the board. Crisscross pattern when we bolt it on. Got to make sure it goes on nice and evenly. We don't want any leaks or issues with that, so let's go ahead and do that next. I got our battery box back in. Literally everything is bolted down. I just gotta put the bumper back on. So let me go ahead and knock that out. We got a little radiator cover here. We gotta still put coolant in it. Probably gonna add like half a quart of oil because we'd lose some, although honestly, maybe not. We're gonna do an oil change after the first startup. I wanna get any kind of initial gunk in the old oil, and then we'll go ahead and throw new stuff on there, so it's no big deal. This oil literally only has 1,000 miles on it, but we're doing a change because it's been about a year, so that's that. Pretty good. Map's hooked up. All our electronics are hooked up. Everything except for the battery. I charged the battery last night. I wanted to make sure we had a full charge. It has been sitting for a while and I was struggling to start when we first started this whole thing up. So the hood was up at the beginning of part 1. So I want to make sure we're good there. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and put in the bumper now and our little bottom panels and stuff. And all right, so car's back together. That is pretty much to conclude part 3 of this video. If I get it started, I get it started, but the next part's gonna be installing the new tune and all that stuff. So if I get it started before this video goes out, which is very likely, I'll throw in a clip of it running at the end of this so I don't leave you guys totally hanging, going through an hour and who knows how long for nothing. But yeah, there we go. Let's get the new tune on. But for you guys, that's it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take it easy. Definitely excited.